I made an article a few months back called Massive Worlds in Indie Games. I didn't think it was good enough for a video, however, and it also came through super formal, so I'm deciding to back up my focus a bit and look at how the scale of an indie game can vastly impact its perception and enjoyability. So please grab some tea, get comfy, light a fire, preferably not on like the floor next to you, maybe like a fireplace or something, and let's talk about scale. And before you make the connection in your mind, I don't fundamentally enjoy an open world sprawled with something to do in every corner. Lots of the time I see that all as extra filler in between the meat of the game, and breaking away from that meat, the main storyline, focuses me, usually because the side quests I'm attempting have no bearing on anything I care about and are created at a much lower quality than the mainline story. I don't want to sound like a donkey clone, but Assassin's Creed is my go-to example of this. I played the first 5 games in the story, took a break for Black Flag and Rogue, and came back for Unity, which had me leaving the franchise for good. It wasn't that Unity was a bad game, it's just that I couldn't take the repetitiveness of the series anymore. There's a great big world to roam that's just about empty. It's not empty. The main storylines are usually beefy, lasting over 10 hours, but all of the extra shiz baked in is devoid of flavor. And I know Assassin's Creed isn't an indie game, but I'm having problems finding an indie game done on a massive scale that's mostly stuffing. I mean, I guess No Man's Sky is a good example. A few years ago, this game hopped on most of our wish lists because of this video's topic, its scale. They promised something like 15 gazillion worlds split between 1,000 galaxies or something crazy, and they did deliver on the number of worlds, but they missed just about every other promise. But we all remember that, and I hesitate to bring it up at all because I know they did a 4-year grind where they finally made the game all they promised and more. Even though I still can't find myself having fun in it. If you haven't seen Internet Historian's video on it, you really should. It'll get you caught up and then some. For the most part though, I'm having trouble thinking of bad indie titles that make use of scale because A, indie game studios don't have the moolah or manpower to create detailed games on the size that AAA studios can, and B, I find indie games are more based on unique mechanics, perspectives, and stories rather than tremendous worlds to explore. Oh, and C, most indie games done poorly are filtered out, never to be touched by the wide gaming community. But yeah, scale in indie games. I don't know how much we as gamers think about this until we're actually witnessing it in use. I picked up Subnautica the year of its full release because a good friend of mine told me he couldn't put it down, and then I got it and I couldn't put it down. So when you drop into that world, your movement is pretty limited, even with the sea glide, like a paddle thing you get that's deployable. So traversing the map that's 2.25 square miles of real space is a big daunting task. So why does this game stick to anyone who picks it up? It's because, and I'm very happy to share this with you, the game is masterful at balancing its story, world, and progression with the unknown. The game incites a desire to explore the massive map without it being a chore. The story cues you in as you're falling out of the sky in an escape pod that's crash landing from like a massive ship, and you open the door to find vast nothingness. But there is, in the middle of that sea, the Aurora, a ship big enough to be a World of Warcraft expansion burning on the horizon. You're all alone at sea, stagnant in a life pod, but then you peek your head below the water and you find an endless world bustling with life. There's fish to eat, there's fish that eat you. The story tells you where to find the remnants of other humans, giving you a small spark of light that you're not the only survivor of a massive expedition. But when you find every other life pod that sent out a signal, they're all already dead or long gone.
0 human life signs detected.
But you don't give a shit. The story is spread out in a way where you'll naturally progress without having to take too many detours. The world just seems to get bigger and bigger the more you progress, and that's the driving force for continuing your descent, a desire to see the next element of this amazing new world. At first, you're reliant on swimming up to the surface to replenish your oxygen, preventing you from headed too far below surface level, but then you get an underwater car and a super suit and can head down to the cold dark floors of the ocean, or an amethyst heaven, or a boiling magmatic hellscape complete with fire-breathing demon monster. There are some truly amazing aspects to the many ecosystems, including a wide variety of flora, some of which are essential to progression, but in Subnautica's case, I think fauna outweighs flora in every way. You know all this though, since the game has been out since 2014 and just about every gaming YouTuber has played through it already. But really quickly, let's just touch a little bit more on that fauna for a second, and oh my God, it's the part that had me blissfully sinking in over 100 hours. Them leviathans, huge creatures bigger than anything possible on Earth. To put it in scale, pun very intended, the blue whale, the largest known living organism we know of, has been clocked in at a max of around 34 meters. The first leviathan you see in Subnautica is 70 meters long, nearly double the blue whale and a whole hell of a lot beefier. It's so large that its back is inhabited by a small ecosystem of plants and algae. In pure amazement, me and millions of others scoured a detailed open world as its sole human inhabitant, holding our breath for the next crazy fish monster to show up. The scale of the leviathans and the world they inhabit constitutes the majority of why Subnautica hooked me. So scale is mysterious, an element of a game that can captivate and awe. It's something we all have a shared perception of from the real world, but when we head into video games, it's up to the developers to mold and twist however they please. Or is it? Superliminal takes perspective and scale and turns them into a beautiful game mechanic. Instead of being placed in a massive open world, you're confined to your own dream, and like a dream, your reality is only how you perceive it. A Rubik's Cube or a chess piece can look 30 feet tall if you hold it right in front of your face, and in Superliminal, you can warp reality to fit that or any other perception. The moon, hundreds of thousands, or however many miles away, turns into a little ball if you grab it out of the sky, and if you look at it at the right angle, it's a bigger ball, and on top of that bigger ball is the exit to the next stage. Perception and bending it is all that Superliminal cares about. The game's use of looping hallways and labyrinth-like designs with the overtone of panic as you delve further and further into the dream world are perfectly contrasted by the amount of freedom the game allows you to enjoy with its mechanics. And there's also the fact that you're stuck inside of your sleeping mind, and if we're talking about scale, how do you even quantify the square footage of that? Even Superliminal doesn't know at times. This game just keeps begging the question, do you like jazz? And while Superliminal applies the most intuitive use of scale I've ever seen in indie games, traditional uses of massive scale worlds done in a consistent high quality kick ass. West of Loathing made me cry laughing, Red Dead Redemption 2 can speak for itself, I loved Bioshock Infinite's colorful world, and Valheim has the freshest sandbox premise we've seen in a while. I loved those goddamn boss battles, and the simple building, and the cooking, and the crafting, even good procedural generation for seamless exploration, so it's super easy to play with your friends, but goddamn do I need more boss fights. Speaking of which, ever hear about Remnants from the Ashes? It's super high rated, so you probably have, but if you haven't, you should go check it out if you're looking for something good to grind. When a few friends and myself picked it up a while back, we sunk a good amount of time into it before running into a bug where we couldn't find someone called the Stuck Merchant on that green planet in our campaign, so we couldn't keep progressing naturally. I think there was a way to find an adventure adventure mode, but we never got around to it and we just moved on. But it was a good game though, and I'm sure the bugs we encountered got smoothed out judging by Steam's overwhelmingly good rating of it. It's got shooting, different upgrades for different play styles, 3 different classes, that nifty procedural generation I mentioned for some unique maps each time, even though that's what caused the Stuck Merchant not to spawn in our run, and boss battles. So Aaron, why did you bring up Remnant from the Ashes in a video talking about scale? It's because Remnant utilizes it, if not explicitly, pretty subtly, which I'm sure you probably gathered. On the explicit side, you guessed it, boss fights. I bought this game at 2 AM with some friends knowing nothing going in, so when I saw that massive end, I knew I made a very rare good decision. The bosses were great, and while for the most part they're varying degrees larger than you, aka the scale part, you could tell bosses apart by distinct designs. Oh, and they're not Dark Souls level difficulty fights, even though the game keeps getting compared to them. The main bosses can't really be classified as easy though, since they're pretty beefy. The Ent and the Echs come to mind immediately since my 3-man party wiped a good amount of times on both of their fights, so I got a real great chance to admire them. The Ent comes straight out of nowhere and has a fight that encompasses its own overgrown stadium. It looks like an ancient octopus tree if I'm being straight with you, but tackling a monster hundreds of times the size of your character does something different from you altogether from the regular combat. Scale is also good for indicating health and strength, because when a bumblebee with despair attacks you, you don't really expect to take a lot of damage, but when this bumblebee with despair attacks you, you die about 20 times, and when a brother pops up, you expect an additional 40 caskets. Did I say bosses weren't that difficult? Because I definitely lied. On the non-explicit side of scale, elaborative world building usually gives you a sense to the scale of the universe, and in Remnant's case, the post-apocalyptic world, or worlds I should say, are littered with clues as to what has transpired, some of which you're forced to learn as you progress and some you can walk right past. You fight an alien force that savaged the 5 fairly large planets you travel, and you're on the losing side. Remnant does a good job of letting players focus on the fun Dark Souls-like gameplay with the option of diving into its wide lore, and that lore is really wide. I found a really in-depth video with a weirdly suggestive title that goes over everything well, link in the description, and it's 47 minutes. That's a lot of lore coming from one game, and a lot of players probably skip right over it, and that's completely fine. But it's the fact that the developers spent so much time adding together so many details to make it really expansive that gives it an extra underlying tone of scale. Fighting with friends through 5 different worlds, god, that's like a tongue twister, all with their own zones and bosses, are amazing. So if you came here looking for something to play, this one's a really good bet, and you can trust it'll hit you with the scale factor when it matters, just like the other titles I mentioned. So, as you gather, scale is versatile, and I'm in love with seeing it in action. It can inspire fear or awe, can be based in reality or far from it, wide enough to encompass a universe of lore, or specific enough to eat you whole. Its uses go on and on, so I probably missed a good few titles that I should have mentioned, so feel free to comment some, I'd love to check them out. And that about rounds out this video. I hope it was a comfy watch, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. We're planning a video about the many struggles indie developers face for the near future, so you can expect that shortly. I'll see you guys next time.